Hi, welcome to the Growing Good podcast. I wanted to give you a brief description of what you're about to listen to. This week, we were honored to be able to interview Maddie Kartoz, who's the garden operations manager for City Sprouts in Boston. And Maddie grew up in the Garden State, where her job as a farmhand sparked her love of local food and agriculture, as did her discussions around the dinner table with her family. They have since worked as an instructor for Thompson Island Outward Bound and Tidelines Institute, leading sea kayak expeditions, teaching social emotional skills, and fostering students' relationship to the natural world and each other. You can tell she's full of energy, creativity, and passion. She is very proud to join City Sprouts in bringing students across Boston access to experiential learning in the garden. She holds a BFA in theater arts from Boston University and is an alum of the Tidelines Glacier Bay Year. In her free time, she can be found hiking, rock climbing, and writing. If you can believe she has time for that. Ton of energy, well spoken. You're going to love this interview. Hi, I'm Cameron Bonzi. I'm the Vice President of Marketing with Coast to Main Brands, and I'm here with Maddie Kartoz. And you grew up in the Garden State. What kind of music did you listen to?
In the Garden State? Well, naturally, I listen to Bruce Springsteen,
Okay,
just like
that's what I'm
everyone I
saying.
know.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, they
perfect.
raised us right down there.
Okay,
Um,
I had to know.
yeah, so how did I get here? Well, like you said, I had a job on a farm in high school and pretty quickly realized that I was very interested in local food systems. And also there was a really strong food culture in my home. My family ate family dinner together pretty much every night, which is quite the feat if you have two working parents and three kids. Um, and that time around the table, that time with good food that we had made, we went to the farmer's market, there were always herbs growing out back. And that time is really central to what I value about my family and had started to merge with what I found value in my work. And so I just really started to become interested in manual labor, in local systems, and in what happens when people are connected to those local systems. And so that interest kind of led me to, I had another internship job on a permaculture farm during college. And that was actually during the summer of COVID because I was in college during the pandemic. And so actually I was a theater major. And as you
Saw
can
that.
imagine,
Yeah, yeah.
during the pandemic, theater disappeared. And so I turned to the other things I knew I was interested in, and I wound up working at this permaculture farm in northern New York called Cross Island Farms. And I learned so much that summer. And then school continued during the pandemic, and I took a break and I went to a place called Tidelines Institute, where there's also a really strong food culture. And at Tidelines, it's basically a micro college that's on kind of an Alaskan homestead. And so a lot of the food that we ate, we were also growing. And so that kept me on this trajectory where I was really interested in local food, in food that we grow and then share together. And that has kind of led me into outdoor education, which has then led me to City Sprouts. Boston is where I went to school, but it's also become my home. And I'm really interested and passionate about doing work that builds community here and also that builds resilient community and community that is empowered to handle the challenges that are coming with climate change, community that's empowered to handle kind of our increasing isolation in an online world. And I think that the work of growing food and then the work of sharing food and understanding food is an amazing way to do that.
It's one of my favorite things, and being able to work with folks like you that are out here doing the work and actually interacting with the kids and taking that passion that you so obviously display and teaching those things is inspirational to us too. City Sprouts has been around for over 20 years, right?
Yeah. We're
And
coming up on 25 in a couple of years.
and how many people at City Sprouts now do you have? I went online, I was looking,
Yeah.
and again, a very diverse group of people that have a lot of passion.
It's about 15 people, so it's a pretty small nonprofit. And 7 of those people are working as educators. So they're in schools teaching during the day. They're in our gardens working directly with the students.
So they're teaching and you're coordinating, right? You're the garden operations manager. So what comes under garden operations manager? What are your specific duties?
It's kind of like a site managing job. So I'm the person who's responsible for, in this case, making sure that we have dirt in our gardens at the top of the growing season. I'm the one making sure that we've portioned out all of the seedlings and they're all getting planted. When people have questions about how to grow stuff, what they should do to prune their tomatoes or fertilize, they're coming to me. Some kind of all the behind the scenes nuts and bolts of making those sites be great growing sites, but also be great outdoor classrooms. We're not just plunking down tiny little farms at schools. We're really trying to build a space that engages kids on a learning level. And so there are things that happen when we think about how high are the beds, right? We want them at kid height. We don't care if they're at adult height. What kind of plants are in the garden, and not just neat rows of this is our row of peas and spinach and whatever, but really things that are intertwined. Kind of a polyculture is basically how we grow all of our gardens,
Or
so that when kids are in them, there's all sorts of colors and shapes and textures for them to experience in a very small area.
is there, do you say this is what we're going to grow, or is it working with the teacher and the kids for them to say what they'd like to grow and kind of combine those things?
A little bit of both. We try to plant responsively, and what I mean by that is like looking at the cultural groups that are active at those schools. For example, in a lot of our Boston schools, there are a lot of Cape Viridian students who cook with things like red callaloo and Swiss chard at home. And so we want to make sure we have those things in our garden, that they're reflected in that space, and that they walk in and they say, "Oh, I know that because I ate it last night." And then we also have kind of our like tried and true set of things that we try to grow at all of our gardens. So each of our gardens is going to have like a ton of herbs that have scents, have different textures, have different flavors. All of our gardens are going to have a Three Sisters mound, so that we can talk about indigenous planting practice, so that we can talk about reciprocity between plants. We're in the process of getting some kind of fruit into all of our gardens. As you can imagine, kids love fruit. And they're like, that bean is cool, but can we please grow a strawberry? And so working on that. And then from there, we try and focus also on things that are like kid size that we don't have to cut. So we grow only cherry tomatoes. We grow a lot of sugar snap peas. We grow a lot of ground cherries. Kids love those. Um, and we also grow like little the Mexican sour gherkins that are like small. Um, and so kind of over the years, and again, I'm a little newer to the team, but there's been passed down this set of like, what are the great kid crops? And then on top of that, we try to plant responsibly to the school's cultures and demographics.
Going back to that, and kids' crops, but planting responsibly. And what I was thinking about is you talking initially, you started out by saying we had dinner at home most nights, and that in and of itself was an accomplishment. And you look back on that, and you get this real sense of, uh, it's an emotional connection, right? And what you learned around that table, not only growing the food, but also the conversation they had. And that has to impact those kids, that sense of this is what we did back home, or this is what my parents did.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's like I'm not out there with the kids, but one of my favorite things to hear about is kids walking into the garden and going like, "Oh, I know that thing that we're growing." Um, and or seeing a picture of like there was enough that every kid could take home some spinach or some chard or whatever it was that day. And you're like, we don't know what happens to the food once it leaves our gardens, but it's a really wonderful feeling to see it get distributed.
What's the most difficult part, or not, I don't difficult, I don't know if that's the word, but or the most complicated part of sustaining school gardens? Is it really the people that the volunteers that you have to have, or what is there something else?
Yeah, that's a good question. And, I'm going to be managing our volunteer program this summer, and we've worked really hard to advertise it not just as like we have a need. And we do, we have a need. We run summer programming in some of our gardens, but not in all of them. And because that's the prime gardening season, someone has to be there. And so we have a need. But really, I've tried to kind of walk it backwards and think about what can we provide? Because in Boston, where we are, the waiting list for a community garden plot is sometimes as long as 4 years long. I'm on a wait list for a community garden in my neighborhood. I probably won't even live here by the time they give me a plot.
Yeah.
And so really kind of walking it back and reframing it and thinking about, well, what can we offer people? And what we can offer them is a third space and an almost like community garden experience where they also have additional educational support and they also get to come to, like the volunteer appreciation event that's a midsummer garden party or some harvest festival. So that it is a challenge. I mean, we have 24 sites at City Sprouts. Even though a lot of those gardens aren't very big, that's a lot to maintain. And so the coordination and the recruitment and building a culture around those gardens where people aren't just like, oh, I have to go do this task for this nonprofit because I said I would, but where people are feeling a sense of ownership over that space and feeling that, I'm going to go take care of the garden where my kids go to school with my kid, or I'm a neighbor here and I'm going to go steward this place and this garden because even though those aren't my kids, I live here and I'm part of this place and I'm part of this system where we educate our students. And that is a challenge because people have a limited amount of time and you need to make something that people are going to choose to do because they feel excited by it. And that means that they have to feel that they belong there and that there's something in it for them. And that something isn't just like the feel good of volunteering, but it's also that you're taking home the produce. And it's also that now you're part of our system and part of the piece of the wheel that's educating these students. And then there's also, I mean, in Boston, just a challenge of being so spread out. Every other outdoor farm job I've had has been on site, and it's simple and fast to say, oh, something is broken and we need to go fix it. But when you have 24 different sites and an office that's not really set up as a like workshop, fixing something or getting a part out to a school or a supply out to a school, just becomes a much more extended process. And so that's also been a learning curve for me about what it takes to do site-based work versus working on a farm.
Well, it's amazing the distribution that you did with those 24 schools just on the soil. There was a tremendous amount of work on that, right?
Yeah.
Picking up
Yeah.
the soil, dropping off 10 bags here, 10 bags there, distributing all of that. Is there, when you have volunteers and when you have the teachers involved, I'm assuming you have some type of curriculum that you give them? What is
Yeah.
the training that you do with them?
So our garden educators are coming into schools and they're teaching those classes and they're supported by our program director, Melissa Wender. And she is creating a curriculum that then we are enabling those educators to riff off of. So they have a set of things that we want them to teach, like we want them to teach trellis building lessons. We want them to teach about how crops rely on each other. We want to teach them that plants grow differently from roots and from seeds and also from like bulbs in the case of flowers. And then also we are hoping to equip them with enough knowledge of both the gardening world and the STEM side of that, because we are a STEM focused organization, but also enough knowledge of child development that they can say like, oh, I think that I can shift this lesson in this way when I bring it to my kindergarten class versus when I bring it to my third, fourth grade class. So when educators are coming to us, they're getting a garden training, though a lot of them also come in with that experience. They're also getting classroom management training and kind of like teaching skill training. And then they're also, as they immerse themselves in their schools, I think they learn really quickly how to adapt to the needs of their particular school students and garden.
I think the teachers also, this is what brings out the best in teachers because it's like coaching. It is the same thing, and you're taking something that's in front of you, and how do you do this in the moment? And you're not teaching to a number standard like somebody takes a test on a piece of paper. It's an experience. And the success
Yeah.
can't be measured in one way. It can't just be the harvest, but it's the kid and the connection. As you mentioned, the plants depending on themselves. And through that process, you teach the kids that people have to depend on each other too. And there's this complex microbiology that's going on, and there's all this communication, and that's how we all win, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. That's how we all win. And yeah, I mean, in public school systems, standardization is getting pushed younger and younger. And in a lot of other areas, these students are held to those standards. And so I think one of the beauties of experiential education that's in this form, where they're not on a field trip. This isn't a one-time event. This isn't their summer break. This is a part of their every week at school for a lot of them. Is that we get to create a curriculum that responds to that standard science curriculum and is supporting what they're learning every year, but is also a little bit outside of it and has that room to breathe and that room to be both something where it's like, yes, there is STEM content to this lesson. And also, it's about understanding that through spending time outside, through spending time in observation, and doing like this social emotional learning that happens so naturally in those spaces. And I think that that's just the beauty of it to me. And that's, I think, something that really compels teachers and compels schools to keep us on, is because they see the value in that and they see that something really rich and constructive is happening that supports the standards without being so strictly held to them.
I think that's exactly what teaching is, that you that you give, you give them the support and it will come. A natural teacher will connect with that kid and they'll get more out of that than any other way. And especially if you're doing something you love and you're outside and you're interacting, that can be the magic part of it. How do you with 24 gardens and those getting those volunteers and that communication, how do you guys do that communication back home or out to the community to bring on volunteers?
Yeah, that's been a big discussion for us at the office this year. And we started off with just good old fashioned postering, and sent everyone out with a stack and said, hey, please go to the library, please go to the churches that are near your school. A lot of the community gardens in Boston have bulletin boards. Please go over there. The Boys and Girls Clubs, the bulletin board in the schools. A lot of the Boston schools and Cambridge schools have something called a family liaison, which is not something I grew up with, but talk
Yeah.
to those people. Um, and then we also went to volunteer fairs. We posted on our own Instagram, tried to get partner organizations with us or organizations that do similar work in Boston to post about us and talk about us. And we're now seeing the fruits of that and seeing that volunteer base get built. And, we'll see where that takes us. But once we have them assigned to a school, we start to do in-person work and do kind of an orientation where everyone gets to meet each other, and then divide people into cohorts at the school, give them a training for that site. We bring on a volunteer coordinator in the summer every year whose job really is to make sure all those calendars are lining up and make sure that the gardens are all getting taken care of, make sure that when volunteers who come to us with all levels of experience about gardening say like, hey, I have no idea what I'm doing, that there's someone who can go there and garden with them and say, well, here's what to harvest, here's what to water, here's what to weed out because it doesn't belong here. So a lot of effort and a lot of intentionality goes into supporting those people because, it's like I said, really trying to shift from we have a need to we have a capacity, and we have the capacity to teach a lot of adults how to garden and give a lot of adults access to some produce over the summer and access to a space that they can be in outside.
Where does City Sprouts? I know you have to raise a lot of money. Where does the funding come from? I
Yeah,
mean, are there school
that's a great
budgets that pay
question.
for some of this?
I'm
How do you do it? How do you
Yeah.
do it?
There's some different sources, and I am not our development person. We have a wonderful development person, Jessica, who is really good at her job. And we have contracts with the schools. We work with public schools, and so it's up to the districts to bring us into their contracts. And I think we're really lucky that our position there is really stable because I think we're doing a good job, and schools can see that this is good work. They want us there. So some of the money is coming in from the school districts themselves. There's, of course, grants that are sometimes for more specific projects, sometimes unrestricted. We just got a grant that is allowing us to rat proof several of our Cambridge gardens in collaboration with a local provider called Green City Growers. They're really amazing, and they're going to build these really cool rat proof beds for us. So things like that. And then we also, every year we have an event called Dig It. It was actually just 2 weeks ago at MIT, and that's our like spring gala. And we bring in money through that. We bring in money through private donations, and a lot of corporate sponsors. We engage a lot of corporations. I mean, in Boston in particular, there's a lot of tech, there's a lot of biotech, and a lot of those places really want to send people out to do kind of a day of team building and bonding. And they're like, yeah, get me out of the office, get my hands dirty. And often those corporations will then also become a sponsor of us.
I
So
think
all of those things together make up our operation budget every year.
there is not only that experience for people volunteering, and yes, they want to get out of the office, and most, not most companies, but a lot of companies have that volunteer pay, that they will actually pay somebody to go volunteer. But also, May is mental health month. There's a lot of benefits mental health wise to gardening. It's just proven. So I'm sure people are doing that for the mental health side too. Where do people go to? Is it best that they would go to citysprouts.org to find out more about the program? Is that the best place to find information about
Yeah.
you?
Yeah, citysprouts.org has a ton of information about our programs, about our team, about opportunities to get involved, whether that's volunteering, or we also have a program for middle schoolers in the summertime that's kind of open enrollment. And then we're on Instagram, and there's a lot of information about us on there too.
We work with a lot of folks like you, and we work with independent garden centers. So I'm glad that we were able to connect you with Mahoney's, which is a historical garden center in the greater Boston area. So, I just like to put in there, buy local, ask your local retailer about information, about City Sprouts, about growing good. And I want to thank you for coming on today and keep doing the work you do.
Yeah, thank you so much, Cameron. It's been really a joy, and seeing the dirt go in and seeing the effect in the garden, and knowing that it's coming from an ethos with the company to serve people that need it. And yeah, I just want to thank you for inviting me on and setting up the dirt distribution for us. It went great, and it's just a really exciting time to be a gardener. And yeah, thanks for talking with me today.
Pleasure. Thank you.